Henry Ford's fingers traced over the screen of his tablet, analyzing the latest revenue reports. $70,000. Another profitable month. He smiled to himself, a subtle curve of his lips that disappeared as quickly as it formed. The numbers were impressive. His tech logistics company had exceeded expectations again, but no one in his personal life would ever know. For the kitchen downstairs, he heard the front door slam and his wife's voice call out his name. Irritation lacing each syllable. Henry took a deep breath, closed the financial app, and pulled up a fake bank statement showing a modest income. The transformation was complete, from millionaire CEO to struggling mid-level manager in seconds. "Henry, I've been calling you." Sophia's voice grew louder as she climbed the stairs to his home office. He turned to his chair, but just as she appeared in the doorway. Even annoyed, Sophia Ford was beautiful, her dark hair falling in perfect waves around her shoulders. Her makeup flawless despite the afternoon shopping trip. But the scowl on her face marred what had once attracted him. "Sorry, I was focused on work," Henry said, his voice calm and measured. Sophia snorted, tossing her designer purse onto the small couch in the corner of his office. "Work, right? What little of it you have." She crossed her arms over her chest. Veronica called. She and David just bought a summer house in the Hamptons. Henry's expression remained neutral. Sophia's sister and her surgeon husband were frequent topics of conversation, usually as points of comparison. "That's nice for them." "Nice? It's more than nice, Henry. It's what success looks like." She gestured around the modest office at the simple furniture and basic decor of their comfortable but unremarkable suburban house in Charlotte. "Not this," Henry observed her silently. Over their 10 years of marriage, he'd watched as the charming, vibrant woman he'd fallen for transformed into someone materialistic and cold. The change hadn't happened overnight, but rather in small increments, a complaint here, a comparison there, until resentment became her default state. "We're doing fine, Sophia," he said quietly. "Fine?" She laughed, a brittle sound lacking humor. "Veronica's husband brings home triple what you make in a month." "Triple? And you think we're doing fine?" Henry knew David Stetson's exact income. He'd researched it during a potential business acquisition. His brother-in-law made an impressive surgeon salary, but it was barely a quarter of what Henry earned. Not that he would correct her. "What did you buy today?" he asked instead, changing the subject to Sophia's eyes lit up momentarily before dimming again. "Just a dress for Veronica's party next weekend. Nothing special. It's not like I can afford anything truly nice on your salary." He nodded, watching as she picked at her manicured nails. The truth was, their joint account, the only one she knew about, received a carefully calculated deposit each month. Enough to maintain their middle-class lifestyle, but not enough to satisfy her growing appetite for luxury. "I need to finish this report," Henry said, turning back to his screen. "Of course you do." Sophia's voice dripped with disdain. "God forbid you put an extra effort to get a promotion or something. Anything to make more money." She left the room without waiting for his response. Henry stared at the doorway for a long moment, then returned to his actual work, managing millions of dollars across 3 continents. While his wife believed he struggled to afford her shopping habits, he'd started hiding his success early in their marriage as a simple test, curious to see if Sophia would love him regardless of his financial status. The answer had become painfully clear over time. Now, the deception served a different purpose. It revealed her true character, strip by strip, day by day. His phone buzzed with a message from Kellen Graves, his closest friend and business partner. "Meeting with Japanese investors moved to tomorrow. Need you there? Important deal." Henry typed a quick confirmation. Sophia would complain about another late night, but it didn't matter. Nothing she said mattered anymore. He was simply watching, waiting, learning exactly who she was when she thought he had nothing. The sound of breaking glass echoed from downstairs, followed by Sophia's frustrated curse. Henry closed his eyes for a moment, collecting himself before heading down to see what she destroyed this time. That evening, Henry sat at the dining table, fork moving methodically through the takeout Sophia had grudgingly ordered after announcing she was too tired to cook. She sat across from him, scrolling through her phone, occasionally making disapproving noises at whatever she saw on social media. "Veronica is showing off her new car," she finally said, turning the phone to display a gleaming luxury SUV with her sister posing beside it. "Must be nice to have a husband who can provide." Henry took another bite of his food, chewing slowly. We have a perfectly functional car, Sophia. Functional. She slammed the phone down. That's your favorite word, isn't it? Functional house, functional car, functional marriage. Her eyes narrowed. Is that all you want from life, Henry? The bare minimum? He set his fork down, studying her face. There had been a time when they talked about dreams, about building something together. When had that stopped? When had acquiring things become her only goal? What would make you happy, Sophia? He asked, genuinely curious. She seemed startled by the question, then recovered with a bitter laugh. A husband who isn't a complete financial failure would be a start. The words didn't hurt anymore. They were just data points, further confirmation of what he already knew. I see, he said. No, you don't see. Sophia pushed her plate away. Do you know what it's like to have my sister pitying me? To have my friends wondering why I stay with you? Everyone knows you're going nowhere. Henry. Everyone. Yes, you're a joke. A complete loser who can't even afford to buy his wife decent jewelry. She twisted her wedding ring, a simple band he'd given her before his business took off. I deserve better than this. Henry wiped his mouth with a napkin and stood. I have some work to finish. Of course you do. She muttered, run away like always. He paused at the doorway. I'm not running. Sophia, I'm choosing not to engage because you have no defense. Her voice rose. You can't deny that you're a failure. The evidence is all around us in this pathetic house with our pathetic car and our pathetic life. Henry simply nodded once and walked away, her words following him up the stairs. In his office, he unlocked a hidden folder on his tablet and checked the progress of his latest acquisition, a tech startup that would fold perfectly into his growing empire. The deal would add another few million to his net worth. Meanwhile, downstairs, his wife believed him incapable of success. The irony wasn't lost on him. It had ceased to be an experiment years ago. Now it was just a waiting game, waiting for the right moment to show her exactly who and what she'd been belittling all this time. The clock on Henry's dashboard read 9:45 p.m. as he pulled into the driveway of their suburban home. The meeting with the Japanese investors had run longer than expected, but the results were worth it. A new partnership that would expand his logistics operations into East Asia. Opening markets he'd been targeting for years. He sat in the car for a moment, transitioning from the powerful CEO who had just closed a multi-million-dollar deal to the supposedly struggling husband Sophia expected to find. The mental shift was practiced, almost automatic now. The house lights were all on, which wasn't a good sign. Sophia usually retreated to the bedroom early when he worked late, streaming shows and ignoring him when he eventually came home. Lights meant she was waiting up. Waiting up meant confrontation. Henry gathered his briefcase and laptop bag, preparing himself for whatever storm awaited him inside. The front door was unlocked, another bad sign. He stepped into the foyer, immediately sensing the tension in the air. You're finally home. Sophia's voice came from the living room, cold and sharp. Henry set his bags down carefully. The meeting ran long. I sent you a text. Oh, yes. Your very important meeting. She appeared in the doorway. Arms crossed over her silk robe. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail. Her face flushed. What was it this time? Another pointless project that won't lead to a promotion. It was productive, he said simply, moving toward the kitchen to get some water. He could feel her following him, tension radiating from her body. Productive? She repeated mockingly. You know what would be productive? Henry actually making enough money to live decently. He filled a glass from the tap and turned to face her. We have everything we need. Sophia need. Her voice rose sharply. I'm sick of just having what we need. Veronica has what she wants. All my friends have what they want. I'm the only one stuck with. She gestured at him dismissively. This Henry took a slow sip of water, studying her over the rim of the glass. The hatred in her eyes was no longer hidden behind pretense. Good. Honesty, at least, even if it was ugly. Your sister called again. Sophia continued pacing the kitchen. She invited us to their lake house next weekend. I had to make up an excuse because we can't afford to burn a proper gift or contribute to the meals. We could have gone, Henry said calmly, and been a charity cases. No, thank you. She slammed her hand on the counter. Do you know how humiliating it is? Everyone pities me for marrying you. Henry set his glass down. If you're so unhappy, Sophia, perhaps we should discuss separation. Her eyes widened, then narrowed dangerously. So you can leave me with nothing. I don't think so. This house is the only asset we have. And I'm not losing it because you're a failure. The irony almost made him smile. The house, like everything they owned, was in his name, only purchased through one of his subsidiary companies. Sophia had never bothered to look at the paperwork, assuming her name was on the deed simply because she was his wife. I'm going to shower, Henry said, turning away from her building rage. Don't you walk away from me. Sophia's voice echoed through the kitchen. I'm not finished. I am, he replied quietly. It's been a long day. A long day. She mocked, following him into the hall. You have no idea what a long day is. Try spending your life tied to a man who can provide, who makes you live like this when you deserve so much more. Henry continued toward the stairs, her words washing over him without effect. He'd heard it all before, variations on the same theme. He was a disappointment, a failure, unworthy of her. Answer me, she screamed, grabbing his arm and spinning him around to face her. Her eyes were wild now, years of resentment boiling over. Say something. Defend yourself. Henry looked down at her hand on his arm, then back to her face. What would you like me to say, Sophia? His calm response seemed to infuriate her further. Anything. Fight back. Or are you as pathetic as I think you are? Fighting with you accomplishes nothing, he said evenly. Because you always lose. She released his arm with a shove. You're a loser, Henry. A pathetic, broke loser. And I made the biggest mistake of my life marrying you. He looked at her for a long moment, seeing the beautiful woman he'd once loved transformed by greed and bitterness into someone unrecognizable. I'm sorry you feel that way. His composure seemed to snap something inside her. With a wordless cry of rage, Sophia spun toward the kitchen. Henry watched as she grabbed a pot of water that had been sitting on the stove. Water she'd apparently been heating for tea before his arrival. He saw her intention in her eyes a split second before she acted. The pot swung toward him, the water arcing through the air, steaming and hissing as it flew. Henry tried to step back, but not quickly enough. The scalding water hit his right shoulder and chest, soaking through his shirt and burning the skin beneath. Pain lanced through him, sharp and immediate. He gasped, more in surprise than agony, though the burning intensified with each passing second. His shirt clung to his skin, the hot fabric making the burn worse. Get out! Sophia screamed, still holding the empty pot. Beggar who can't work, get out of my house and never show your face again. Henry looked at her, really looked at her, memorizing the hatred in her expression, the way her features contorted with rage, the absolute lack of remorse for having physically attacked him. It was the final piece of data he needed. Without a word, he turned and walked to the coat closet, the movement sending fresh waves of pain across his chest. He pulled out his overcoat and draped it carefully over his injured shoulder. Did you hear me? Sophia followed, her voice still raised. I said get out. Henry opened the front door, pausing only briefly to look back at her. Goodbye, Sophia. He walked out into the cold night, closing the door behind him with a quiet click. In the driveway, he got into his car, wincing as the seatbelt pressed against his burned skin. He started the engine and pulled away from the house, from the woman who had just assaulted him, from the facade he'd maintained for years. Yes, he drove. Henry pulled out his phone and made 2 calls. The first to Kellen Graves, who answered on the second ring. It's time, Henry said simply. She finally crossed the line. Kellen's voice was unsurprised. Yes, implement the contingency plan. All of it. Henry's voice remained steady despite the pain radiating from his shoulder. With pleasure, Kellen replied. Where are you headed? The penthouse. Have Dr. Miller meet me there. Henry added, I'll need him to document some burns. The second call was to his lawyer, giving brief, precise instructions that would set everything in motion. By morning, Sophia would understand exactly what she had done. By morning, her world would begin to crumble. As he drove through the quiet Charlotte streets toward his real home, the luxury penthouse he'd owned for years, Henry felt no anger, no sadness, just a cool determination. He had given Sophia every chance to show her true character. And she had not disappointed. Now she would face the consequences of loving money more than integrity. The burn on his shoulder throbbed painfully, but Henry welcomed it. Physical pain was clarifying, focusing, and he needed to be absolutely focused for what came next. Sophia Ford woke to the unfamiliar sound of voices outside her bedroom window. Male voices, businesslike and brisk. For a moment, she lay still, confused by their presence. then remembered the events of the previous night. Henry walking out after her justified outburst. Good riddance, she thought. Stretching languidly across the bed, she no longer had to share. He probably spent the night at a cheap motel licking his wounds. Maybe the experience would finally motivate him to do something with his pathetic career. The voices grew louder, accompanied by the sound of something being hammered into the ground. Curious, Sophia rose and walked to the window, brushing aside the curtain to see what was happening. Her heart stuttered in her chest. Two men in suits were positioning a large sign in her front yard. A foreclosure sign? What the hell? She muttered, blinking rapidly as if the sight might disappear. But the sign remained. Its bold red letters announcing property foreclosed for all the neighbors to see. Sophia grabbed her robe, hastily tying it around her waist as she rushed downstairs and flung open the front door. "Excuse me," she called to the man. "There's been a mistake. This house isn't foreclosed." One of the men, older with graying hair and a clipboard, looked up at her with practiced indifference. "Are you Sophia Ford?" "Yes, and this is my house. You need to remove that sign immediately." The man consulted his clipboard. "Ma'am, this property is owned by Ridgepoint Holdings, not by you or your husband. It's been legally repossessed as of 7 a.m. this morning." "That's impossible." Sophia's voice rose. "We've never missed a mortgage payment." "There is no mortgage, ma'am." The property was owned outright by Ridgepoint Holdings, which has terminated the occupancy agreement. He handed her an envelope. "This contains the legal documentation and notice to vacate. You have 24 hours to remove your personal belongings." Sophia stared at the envelope, her mind racing. "Ridgepoint, what? No, this house is in our name. My husband, I bought it 5 years ago." The man shook his head. "According to county records, you were never on the deed, ma'am. Neither was your husband personally. The property has always been owned by Ridgepoint Holdings. If you have questions, the contact information for their legal department is in that envelope." He turned away, considering the conversation over. Sophia stood frozen on the porch, the envelope clutched in her trembling hand, as the men finished securing the sign and walked back to their vehicle. Inside, she tore open the envelope, scanning the legal documents with growing horror. The language was complex, but the message was clear. She had no legal right to the house and never had. The occupancy agreement, something she'd never heard of, had been terminated due to breach of contract conditions regarding tenant behavior. Sophia rushed to Henry's office, frantically searching for the house paperwork they'd signed years ago. She found the folder in his filing cabinet, labeled House Documents, and spread the papers across his desk. There was the purchase agreement she remembered signing. But as she examined it closely, she realized with growing dread that it wasn't a standard mortgage. It was indeed an occupancy agreement between Henry and a company called Ridgepoint Holdings. Her signature was there, but only as an approved occupant, not an owner. "This can't be happening," she whispered, hands shaking as she continued to search through the papers. "This can't be real." A sudden electronic beep from downstairs startled her. Then another and another, the sounds of appliances powering down. She rushed back downstairs to find the refrigerator dark, the digital clock on a microwave blank. The power had been shut off. Sophia grabbed her phone to call Henry, only to discover her service had been disconnected. She tried the landline with the same result. Even the Wi-Fi was gone. Panic rising. She ran to the front door, intending to borrow a neighbor's phone, only to find the key no longer worked in the lock. Someone had changed it while she was upstairs. No, Sophia muttered, jiggling the handle uselessly. She was locked inside her powerless house with no way to communicate that a knock at the back door sent her running through the house. Maybe it was Henry coming to explain this nightmare, to tell her it was all a mistake. But the face that greeted her through the glass wasn't Henry's. It was a moving crew, 3 men in uniforms waiting impassively. Sophia opened the door, confusion and fear making her voice sharp. "What do you want?" "We're here for the furniture and household items," the lead man said, consulting a tablet. "All property belonging to Ridgepoint Holdings." "Nothing here belongs to Ridgepoint Holdings." Sophia snapped, "Everything in this house is mine and my husband's." The man shook his head. "Not according to our work order, ma'am. We have a detailed inventory of items to remove, which is everything except personal clothing and effects." He showed her the tablet screen, which displayed a comprehensive list of every piece of furniture, every appliance, even the artwork on the walls. "This is insane." Sophia protested. "You can't just take everything. We have legal authorization." He handed her another document. If you interfere, we're instructed to call the police. You're welcome to stay and monitor, but we have a job to do. Numb with shock, Sophia watched as the team entered her house and began efficiently wrapping and removing items. The sofa where she'd sat countless evenings, the dining table where she'd hosted dinner parties, the bed where she'd slept last night, all loaded into a large moving truck parked in the driveway. As they worked, the reality of her situation began to sink in. Henry wasn't a financial failure. He couldn't be. No financial failure could orchestrate something like this, which meant the doorbell rang, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. Sophia ran to answer it, hoping against hope for salvation. Instead, she found her sister Veronica standing on the porch. Designer sunglasses perched on her perfect nose. Expression unreadable. "Veronica," Sophia cried. "Thank God you're here. Something terrible is happening. The house is being repossessed. They're taking everything." "I know," Veronica cut her off coldly. "It's all over the neighborhood chat." Sophia Ford being evicted from home. She never owned quite the scandal. Sophia stared at her sister in disbelief. "Aren't you going to help me?" Veronica removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes filled not with sympathy but with contempt. "Help you after how you behaved, after how you've treated Henry." "Why would I do that? What are you talking about? Henry is a loser." "Who? Oh my God. You still don't get it." Veronica laughed. A sharp, unpleasant sound. "Your husband is Henry Ford, founder and CEO of Nexus Logistics Group. He's worth millions, Sophia, millions. And you treated him like garbage." Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. That's not possible. He makes $70,000 a month. Try $700,000 a month minimum. And that's just his reported income. Veronica's smile was vicious. "So the beggar actually owned everything. Looks like you're the real fool, Sophia." The moving men brushed past them, carrying out Sophia's prized crystal collection. She barely noticed her mind struggling to process Veronica's words. "How do you know this?" she finally managed to ask. "Everyone knows, darling, everyone except you, apparently. Henry's one of the most successful businessmen in Charlotte. Why do you think David and I always invited you both to events? It wasn't for your charming personality." Veronica glanced at her watch. "I'd love to stay and watch your downfall, but I have a lunch reservation." "Don't bother calling me for help. You've burned that bridge, just like all the others." With that, Veronica turned and walked back to her luxury car, leaving Sophia standing in the doorway of the empty shell that had once been her home. The crushing truth finally breaking through her denial. She had thrown out the man who actually provided everything. And now she had nothing. Henry Ford stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse suite in uptown Charlotte, gazing out at the skyline he partially owned. The morning light cast long shadows across the gleaming hardwood floors of the space that reflected his true status, 3,500 square feet of luxury designed specifically to his tastes. Modern furnishings in deep blues and grays. Original artwork by emerging artists. He personally selected a state-of-the-art smart home system that responded to his voice commands. This was his real life, had been for years, even while maintaining the facade of mediocrity with Sophia. The door to his private elevator opened with a soft chime. And Henry didn't need to turn to know who had arrived. Only one other person had unrestricted access to his penthouse. "Your wife's been evicted," Kellen Graves announced without preamble, striding into the open-concept living area. At 40, Kellen was close to Henry's age but carried himself with a more obvious swagger, the perpetual confidence of a man who had clawed his way up from nothing and wasn't afraid to show it. The movers cleared everything out in under 2 hours. "Professional job." Henry nodded, still looking out at the city, and the locks changed before she even woke up. Security cameras installed at all entry points, monitoring remotely. "If she tries to break in, we'll now." Kellen moved to stand beside him at the window. "How's the shoulder?" Henry rotated it slightly, feeling the pull of the bandages underneath his tailored shirt. "Dr. Miller says second-degree burns. It'll heal. And you got photos for the records. Full documentation. Medical report filed. The penthouse security cameras also caught my arrival last night. Injured." Henry turned to face his friend. "I'm not pressing charges. Not yet. That's not the point of this." Kellen's eyes narrowed. "What is the point then? She physically attacked you. Henry, that's assault. We could have her arrested today." The point, Henry said, walking toward the kitchen to pour them both coffee from the expensive machine that ground beans for each cup, is that I want her to understand what she's done. Not just to me but to herself. An assault charge now would be too quick, too easy for her to dismiss as me being vindictive. He handed Killing a cup, the rich aroma filling the space between them. No, I want Sophia to experience true suffering, the kind that comes from watching everything you thought you were entitled to slip through your fingers. Losing the house was just the beginning. Kellen accepted the coffee, his expression contemplative. You've been planning this for years, haven't you? The separate house ownership, the hidden accounts, all of it. Not initially. Henry moved to sit on one of the sleek leather sofas that faced the window view. When we first married, I kept my success private as a test to see if she loved me or what I could provide. I had hopes that she would pass. But she failed spectacularly. Kellen concluded, joining him. Yes, Henry's voice remained even unemotional. Once I knew who she truly was, I began making preparations, protecting my assets, documenting her behavior, building the case, so to speak. For divorce, Kellen asked. Henry shook his head. Divorce implies a legal battle, financial negotiations. Sophia doesn't deserve the dignity of that process. This isn't about ending a marriage, it's about erasing a mistake. The two men sat in silence for a moment, sipping their coffee. The penthouse was quiet except for the faint sounds of the city below, muffled by the premium insulation and triple-pane windows. The board meeting is at 11. Kellen finally said, changing the subject. The European acquisition is on the agenda. Henry nodded. I'll be there. Have Thomas bring the car around at 10:30. Kellen studied his friend carefully. You seem different today. Lighter somehow. I feel liberated. Henry admitted. Maintaining that facade was exhausting. Pretending to be less than I am. Watching her belittle achievements she knew nothing about. It was a necessary experiment, but I'm glad it's over. And now, Kellen pressed. What's the next move in this game? Henry took another sip of his coffee, savoring the complex flavors. Now we watch as Sophia discovers what happens when the safety net disappears. She'll go to friends first, then family. They'll reject her. They always knew who she was. Then she'll try to find me to fix what she's broken. That's when the real plan begins. Sounds like you've thought of everything. Kellen said, a hint of admiration in his voice. I've had years to consider each possibility. Henry set his cup down and stood moving back to the window to look out at his city. Sophia made a critical error. She assumed I was weak because I was quiet. She mistook patience for passivity. She's about to learn the difference. Kellen joined him at the window. And when she's completely ruined, what then? Henry's reflection in the glass showed no emotion, just calm certainty. Then I'll remember her name only as a lesson learned, a reminder to never again mistake beauty for character. The morning sun caught the glass buildings of uptown Charlotte, making them gleam like the future Henry had always known was his. In his reflection, he saw not the modest husband Sophia had disdained, but the ruthless business titan he'd always been, finally free to live his truth in the open. The burn on his shoulder was a small price to pay for such freedom. Sophia sat on the front steps of the empty house, the foreclosure sign looming in the yard like an accusation. The moving crew had finished their work, leaving her with nothing but the clothes in her closet and a few personal items they deemed not on the inventory. Her phone was useless without service. The house keys no longer worked. And the neighbors had drawn their curtains, avoiding the spectacle of her humiliation. She needed help. She needed a friend. With shaking hands, Sophia gathered the few possessions she could carry, a small suitcase of clothing, her purse, the worthless phone, and began the walk to Brielle Knox's house 6 blocks away. Brielle had been her best friend for years. They'd shopped together, complained about husbands together, shared secrets. If anyone would help her through this nightmare, it would be Brielle. The walk felt endless, each step heavy with the weight of her new reality. Was it true what Veronica had said? Was Henry actually wealthy? Had she spent years belittling a man who could have given her everything she wanted? No, it had to be a mistake. Some kind of elaborate trick. Henry was punishing her for last night. That was all. He'd calmed down, realized he'd overreacted to a minor incident. And everything would go back to normal. That Brielle's house came into view, a lovely colonial with perfect landscaping. Sophia had always been a bit envious of it, though she'd never admitted it. Now she approached the front door like a supplicant, setting down her suitcase to ring the bell. Brielle answered quickly, her expression changing from welcome to weariness as she recognized her visitor. Sophia, this is unexpected. Brielle, thank God. Sophia felt tears threatening, not entirely unintentional. Something terrible has happened. Henry's lost his mind. He's locked me out of the house, shut off all the utilities, had everything repossessed. I know, Brielle interrupted, not opening the door any wider. It's all over the neighborhood group chat. Sophia blinked, momentarily thrown off script. The what? The group chat. Everyone's talking about it. Brielle crossed her arms about how Henry finally had enough of your abuse. Abuse? Sophia's voice rose incredulously. That's ridiculous. Henry's the one who what, provided a home for you, paid all the bills while you spent money on designer clothes, tolerated years of public humiliation. Brielle's eyes had hardened. We've all seen it, Sophia. We've all heard how you talk to him. Sophia felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment. That's not fair. You don't know what it's been like, married to someone so unsuccessful. Brielle actually laughed, a short disbelieving sound. Unsuccessful? Henry Ford is one of the wealthiest men in Charlotte. Everyone knows that. That's what Veronica said, but it can't be true. We live in a modest house, drive a 5-year-old car, because that's what he wanted you to believe. Brielle shook her head. God, you really don't get it, do you? Henry was testing you, and you failed in the most spectacular way possible. Sophia stared at her, supposed friend, the reality of her situation becoming clearer with each passing moment. If you knew he was wealthy, why didn't you tell me? He asked us not to. All of us. He wanted to see if you'd love him for who he was, not what he could give you. Brielle's expression was a mixture of pity and disgust. And after the way you treated him all these years, are you really surprised he finally had enough? Sophia felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, her carefully constructed worldview crumbling. I need a place to stay just for a few days until I can figure things out. Please, Brielle? No, the response was immediate without hesitation. I've watched you belittle Henry at every dinner party, every gathering for years. I've listened to you complain about him while spending his money. I've kept quiet because he asked us to. But I've always disliked who you became, Sophia, the entitled materialistic persona you develop. You can't be serious. Sophia whispered, shock giving way to desperation. We're friends. We were friends. Brielle corrected before you decided that status and money were more important than character. She stepped back, beginning to close the door. I suggest you find a hotel or call Veronica. I'm done enabling your behavior. The door closed with a definitive click, leaving Sophia standing on the porch, her suitcase at her feet with one less option and one more confirmation of Henry's deception. Yes, she turned to leave. She noticed the neighbors watching from windows and porches. Word had spread quickly. Her humiliation was now a public spectacle. She lifted her chin, mustering what dignity she could, and walked away from Brielle's house with no destination in mind. Hotel wasn't an option. Her credit cards were all joint accounts with Henry, likely frozen by now. Friends were apparently not friends at all. That left only one possibility, once she dreaded almost as much as homelessness. Veronica. 2 hours and 3 declined rideshare payment methods later, Sophia stood outside her sister's mansion in the exclusive Myers Park neighborhood of Charlotte. The house had always intimidated her. 10,000 square feet of ostentatious wealth, a monument to Veronica's successful marriage to surgeon David Stetson. Now it represented her last hope. Sophia pressed the intercom button at the gate, swallowing her pride. Yes, Veronica's voice crackled through the speaker. It's me, Sophia said, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. I need to talk to you. A long pause followed. Then the gate swung open without further comment. Sophia trudged up the long driveway, her suitcase feeling heavier with each step. By the time she reached the imposing front door, Veronica was waiting, leaning against the doorframe with an expression of barely concealed satisfaction. Well, she said, looking Sophia up and down. How the mighty have fallen. Sophia bit back a retort. She couldn't afford to alienate her last potential lifeline. I need a place to stay, just until I sort things out. Veronica raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. And why would I help you? After all the times you've looked down on me and David, pretending your life was so perfect. I never looked down on you. Sophia protested weakly. Please. Veronica's laugh was sharp. Every time I mentioned a new purchase or trip, you had some passive-aggressive comment about flashy displays of wealth, or how you and Henry preferred a more modest lifestyle. As if it was a choice and not a necessity. Sophia looked down at her feet, unable to deny the accusation. She had said those things, try to mask her envy with moral superiority. "I'm sorry," she said finally, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. "I was jealous." Obviously, Veronica examined her manicure. "And now you need my help. Ironic, isn't it? Veronica, please. I have nowhere else to go." Her sister studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. "You can stay in a guest house." Temporarily, relief flooded through Sophia. "Thank you. I promise I won't be a bother." "You already are," Veronica said flatly. "But family is family even when they're awful." She led the way through the house toward the back. "There are conditions, of course." Sophia followed, try not to notice the luxuries surrounding her, the marble floors, the designer furniture, the original artwork that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. "What conditions?" "You'll work for your keep," Veronica said over her shoulder. "My regular housekeeper is on vacation and I need someone to fill in." Sophia stopped walking. "You want me to be your maid?" Veronica turned her smile cold. "Beggars can't be choosers, Sophia. Either accept the offer or find a shelter." The humiliation burned through her. But Sophia had no alternatives. "Fine," she managed through gritted teeth. "I'll do it." "Excellent. Uniforms are in the guest house closet. You start tomorrow at 7 a.m. I'll leave a list of duties." Veronica continued walking toward the back of the house. "Oh, and Sophia, if you steal anything, I'll have you arrested." "Don't think I won't." The guest house was actually a converted pool house, luxurious by most standards, with a small kitchenette, bathroom and studio living space, but modest compared to the main house. Sophia set her suitcase on the bed. The reality of her situation sinking in further. She, Sophia Ford, would be cleaning her sister's toilets tomorrow. The thought was so absurd, so completely at odds with the life she'd imagined for herself, that she began to laugh, a high, slightly hysterical sound that quickly transformed into sobs. She sank onto the bed, burying her face in her hands as the tears came hot and bitter. How had everything fallen apart so completely in less than 24 hours? When the tears finally subsided, Sophia moved to the small sofa by the window, staring blankly at the pool and manicured ground beyond. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the perfectly maintained lawn. In the guest house's small television, she found the remote and turned it on, needing a distraction from her thoughts. The local news appeared on screen, and Sophia was about to change the channel when a familiar face made her freeze. Henry, or rather, the man she thought was her husband, was on screen in a tailored suit that probably cost thousands. Speaking at what appeared to be a business conference, the caption beneath him read, "Henry Ford, CEO of Nexus Logistics Group, announces expansion into Asian markets." She increased the volume, hearing his voice confident, authoritative, nothing like the mild-mannered tone he'd used at home. "This partnership represents a $400 million investment in our Trans-Pacific operations," he was saying to a room full of reporters. Nexus Logistics Group continues to lead the industry in innovative supply chain solutions. The reporter's voice overcontinued. Ford, whose net worth is estimated at over $200 million, has been quietly building his logistics empire for the past decade, becoming one of Charlotte's most successful business leaders. Sophia's jaw dropped. $200 million. Her husband, the man she called a beggar, a failure, pathetic, was worth $200 million. The reality she'd been denying all day crashed over her like a tidal wave. It was all true. Henry had deceived her for years, pretending to be an ordinary middle manager while secretly running a business empire. And she had belittled him, insulted him, thrown hot water at him, all while he could have given her everything she'd ever wanted. The irony was so bitter she could taste it. Yes, the news segment ended and the program moved on to other stories. Sophia remained frozen, staring at the screen but seeing nothing. A plan began to form in her mind. She needed to reach Henry to apologize, to make him understand it had all been a terrible misunderstanding. She could win him back. She could fix this. She had to. The alternative, living as her sister's maid, penniless and humiliated, was unthinkable. With renewed determination, Sophia stood somehow. She would find Henry and convince him to forgive her. She would play whatever role necessary, say whatever he wanted to hear. She would get back what was rightfully hers. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Henry Ford was just getting started with his revenge. Henry sat at the head of the conference table in the Nexus Logistics Group headquarters, a modern glass and steel building in uptown Charlotte that bore his company's distinctive blue and silver logo. Around him, 12 board members and executives waited attentively, tablets and notepads ready. The European acquisition was proceeding smoothly, but that wasn't why Henry had called this particular meeting. He had a more personal agenda item to discuss. Before we conclude, Henry said, his voice calm but commanding, I want to bring up a potential acquisition that wasn't on the original agenda. Kellen, seated to his right, gave a slight nod of encouragement. He was the only one who knew what was coming. Wexler Distributors, Henry continued, activating the presentation screen at the center of the table. Financial data for the regional distribution company appeared along with its logo, a family-owned business that's been struggling for the past 3 years, primarily due to outdated practices and significant debt accumulation. The board members studied the information, some with confusion evident on their faces. With respect, Henry said, Janet Coleman, the CFO. Wexler is a relatively small company that doesn't align with our current acquisition strategy. Their distribution network overlaps significantly with facilities we already own, and their technology infrastructure is at least a decade behind ours. Henry nodded, acknowledging the point. You're correct on all counts, Janet. On paper, Wexler doesn't make sense as an acquisition target. Then why are we discussing it? Asked Marcus Reynolds, head of strategic development. Because sometimes business decisions serve multiple purposes. Henry swiped to the next slide, showing the company's ownership structure. Wexler Distributors is owned primarily by George Wexler, with minority stakes held by various family members, including his nephew, Dylan Wexler, who serves as operations manager. He paused, letting the information sink in. George Wexler is my former father-in-law. A ripple of understanding moved through the room. Everyone at the table knew of Henry's recent separation. The company rumor mill had been active, though few knew the details. I see, Marcus said carefully, and you're proposing we acquire this company for personal reasons. I'm proposing we acquire this company because it's vulnerable, undervalued, and can be purchased at a significant discount. Henry corrected smoothly. The personal connection simply brought it to my attention. The business case is what I'm presenting today. He advanced to the next slide, showing a breakdown of Wexler's assets and liabilities. Despite poor management, Wexler owns several key properties in strategic locations. Their client list, while modest, includes some regional players we've been trying to partner with. And their existing contracts for 3 government distribution channels would save us years of bureaucratic navigation. The board members studied the new information with more interest. What's your proposed strategy if we acquire? Janet asked. Full integration of viable assets, dissolution of redundant operations. Henry replied, we would not maintain Wexler as a separate brand. The name would be retired, the management team replaced, and approximately 70% of their workforce either reassigned or let go, including the Wexler family members currently employed there. Marcus asked pointedly. Henry's expression remained neutral, especially the Wexler family members. Their management practices are the primary reason the company is failing. Kellen spoke up for the first time. I've reviewed the preliminary numbers. If we move quickly, we can acquire Wexler at about 60% of its actual asset value. They're desperate for cash and don't have time for a lengthy negotiation period. How desperate? Janet wanted to know. They have a major loan payment due at the end of the month, Henry explained. Without an influx of capital, they'll default and likely face bankruptcy within 60 days. The room fell silent as the board considered the proposal. Henry waited patiently, knowing he presented a solid business case regardless of his personal motivations. A move that we authorized the acquisition team to pursue this opportunity. Marcus finally said, the price point and strategic assets make sense, regardless of the connection to your former in-laws. I second the motion, Janet added, but with the stipulation that you, Henry, remain at arm's length from the negotiations due to the personal connection. Henry nodded. I had already planned to recuse myself from the direct negotiations. Kellen will lead the acquisition team with support from legal and finance. The vote was unanimously in favor. As the meeting adjourned and the board members filed out, Kellen remained behind, waiting until they were alone before speaking. That went even better than expected, he commented. You made it impossible for them to object on business grounds. Because it is a sound business decision, Henry replied, gathering his materials. The personal satisfaction is merely a bonus, a significant bonus. Kellen noted with a slight smile. George Wexler has been feeding Sophie his entitlement for years. Taking his company will devastate him financially and personally. Henry stood, straightening his tie. George taught his daughter that status and money were the only measures of worth. Now he'll learn the consequences of that lesson alongside her. In Dylan, Kellen asked, referring to Sophie, his cousin. Dylan gets the same treatment as the rest of the Wexler management team. Henry said coldly, he's been riding his uncle's coattails for years, collecting a substantial salary for minimal work while constantly reminding everyone of his family connection. His competence doesn't justify his position. They walk together toward Henry's private elevator. How long before the acquisition is complete? Henry asked. With the board approval, we can move aggressively. 2 weeks, maybe less. They don't have the luxury of exploring other options. Henry nodded, satisfied. Make it happen. And Kellen, make sure the press release specifically mentions the company will be fully absorbed and a Wexler name retired. I want that point very clear. The elevator doors opened and Henry stepped inside. Any updates on Sophia? She's staying at her sister's guest house. Kellen reported, working as a housekeeper to earn her keep. According to our sources, a flicker of satisfaction crossed Henry's face. Good. Let me know when the Wexler deal is finalized. I want to time the next phase carefully. As the elevator doors closed, Henry allowed himself a small smile. The pieces were moving exactly as he planned. Sophia was experiencing the first stages of true desperation, and soon her entire family would feel the weight of his influence. The burn on his shoulder had faded to a dull ache, a constant reminder of why he was doing this. Not out of passion or anger, but out of a cold, calculated desire for justice. Sophia and her family had believed themselves superior while looking down on him. Now they would learn exactly who they had been disdaining all these years. Henry checked his watch. He had a meeting with Japanese investors in 30 minutes. Business continued. After all, his revenge was important. But it was just one project among many in his expansive portfolio. And like all his projects, it will be executed with meticulous precision. 10 days later. George Wexler stood in the lobby of Nexus Logistics Group headquarters, his weathered face lined with defeat. At 65, he had the look of a man who had aged years in a matter of days. Beside him, Dylan Wexler, 32 and visibly angry, paced in short, frustrated bursts. This is bull. Dylan muttered loud enough for the receptionist to hear. He can't just do this. He can, and he did. George replied tiredly. We signed the papers, Dylan. It's done. Because we had no choice. He knew we were about to default on the loan. He deliberately waited until we were desperate. George sighed. That's business. We've done similar things over the years. Not to family. Dylan insisted. He's not family anymore. George glanced at his watch. And he's making us wait on purpose. As if on cue, the elevator doors opened. And Kellen Graves stepped out, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit. Mr. Wexler, he greeted them with professional courtesy. Thank you for coming. If you'll follow me, we can discuss the transition details. We're here to see Henry, Dylan demanded. Not his lackey. Kellen's expression didn't change. Mr. Ford is unavailable. As the lead on this acquisition, I'll be handling all transition matters. Now if you'll follow me, he turned without waiting for response, heading back to the elevator. George followed with a resigned expression, pulling Dylan along with a firm hand on his arm. The elevator took them to the 30th floor, where Kellen led them to a conference room with views overlooking the city. The Nexus Logistics logo dominated one wall, while the opposite featured a large screen currently displaying the Wexler Distributors logo with a line drawn through it. Please sit. Kellen gestured to the chairs. George sat heavily, but Dylan remained standing. This is personal. And we all know it, he said accusingly. Henry is doing this to get back at Sophia. Kellen arranged his tablet and papers methodically before responding. Mr. Ford's personal life has no bearing on this business transaction. Wexler Distributors was a strategic acquisition based on asset evaluation and market positioning. Bullshit, Dylan spat. You're telling me it's coincidence that he bought us out right after separating from Sophia? I'm telling you, Kellen said evenly, that Nexus Logistics Group made a business decision approved unanimously by our board directors. Now, shall we discuss your severance packages? Or would you prefer to continue with unfounded accusations? George placed a restraining hand on Dylan's arm. Let it go, son. What's done is done. Defeated, Dylan finally sat. Kellen nodded and began outlining the terms of their departure from the company they had once owned. As per the acquisition agreement, all Wexler family members will be removed from operational positions effective immediately. You'll receive 2 months severance pay, which is generous considering the company's financial situation prior to our purchase. 2 months, Dylan looked outraged. I've worked there my entire adult life. Yes, Kellen agreed. And during your tenure as operations manager, the company lost market share every quarter and accumulated significant debt. Your performance doesn't justify additional consideration. George closed his eyes briefly, the humiliation evident on his face. What about the other employees? There are people who've been with us for decades. Non-family employees will be evaluated individually. Kellen explained, those with valuable skills may be offered positions within Nexus. Others will receive standard severance packages based on years of service. So it is personal. Dylan insisted. You're specifically targeting the Wexler family. We're specifically targeting ineffective management. Kellen corrected. It's not our fault the description applies to all Wexler family members currently employed. He slid 2 folders across the table. These contain your formal severance agreements. You'll need to sign them before leaving today to receive the outline benefits. You'll also find NDAs preventing you from discussing the terms of the acquisition or your departure. George picked up his folder with a trembling hand. Can I ask one question, Mr. Graves? Kellen inclined his head slightly. Of course, did Henry ever mention why? Not the business reasons, we both know those are justifications. The real reason. Kellen considered the older man for a moment. Mr. Ford doesn't need to explain his business decisions to me or anyone else. But if you're asking whether your daughter's behavior influenced his awareness of your company's vulnerability, I think you already know the answer to that question. George nodded slowly, the confirmation of his fears visible in his expression. She ruined us, he whispered. No, Kellen corrected. Your company was already failing due to your own poor management. But Sophia certainly didn't help your case. He stood. I'll give you some privacy to review the documents. A notary is waiting in the next room when you're ready to sign. As Kellen left, Dylan turned to his uncle. We can fight this. There has to be something. There isn't. George interrupted, his voice hollow. It's over, Dylan. The company, my retirement, your job, it's all gone. And unlike Sophia, we don't have a rich sister to take us in. In his private office, 6 floors above, Henry reviewed the security feed from the conference room, watching as his former father-in-law came to terms with his new reality. There was no satisfaction in the older man's defeat. George was merely collateral damage in a larger strategy. His phone buzzed with a message from Kellen. They're signing. G-compliant. De-angry. But powerless news should reach us within hours. Henry sent a simple acknowledgement and returned to his actual work. The Wexler acquisition was a minor note in his business portfolio. The company would be stripped for parts, its valuable assets absorbed, its name erased from the business landscape. Just another day at Nexus Logistics Group. But for Sophia, currently scrubbing her sister's floors for room and board, the news would be devastating. Another support system gone. Another bridge burned. Another consequence of her actions becoming painfully clear. And Henry was just getting started. The Charlotte Business Gala was the premier social event of the season, bringing together the city's elite entrepreneurs, executives, and influencers for an evening of networking, charity, and recognition. Held in the grand ballroom of the Westwood Hotel, the black tie affair featured champagne fountains, gourmet cuisine, and an awards ceremony honoring the year's most influential business leaders. Henry Ford adjusted his custom tuxedo as he stood near the entrance, accepting congratulations from colleagues and acquaintances. He was to receive the Innovator of the Year award later that evening, recognition for Nexus Logistics Group's groundbreaking work in supply chain optimization. Quite a turnout, Kellen commented beside him, surveying the crowd of Charlotte's most powerful figures. Everyone who matters is here, including some who don't. Henry replied quietly, nodding toward a cluster of people near the bar. Among them stood Veronica and David Stetson, his former sister-in-law and her husband, engaged in animated conversation with the mayor. Surprised they showed, Kellen said, considering the circumstances, Veronica wouldn't miss an opportunity to be seen, regardless of family drama. Henry accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. Has there been any sign of our special guest? Kellen checked his phone. Security reports someone matching her description attempting to talk her way past the check-in desk. Apparently, she's claiming to be your wife. Henry's expression remained neutral. And are they following the instructions I provided? To the letter, they'll allow her in, but only after making her wait long enough to feel the humiliation. Kellen raised an eyebrow. You're sure this is what you want? It's going to be very public. That's precisely the point, Henry replied. Sophia craves public recognition. Tonight, she'll receive it, just not the kind she's hoping for. Across the ballroom, Charlotte's business and social elite mingled in their finest attire. Henry was approached continuously, handshakes. Congratulations, business propositions thinly disguised as small talk. He navigated each interaction with practiced ease, all while remaining acutely aware of the ballroom entrance. When Sophia finally appeared, Henry noticed immediately, though he gave no outward indication. 3 weeks of working as her sister's maid had taken a toll. Her designer dress, likely borrowed, couldn't hide the strain in her face or the desperate gleam in her eyes. As she scanned the crowd for him, target acquired. Kellen murmured, want me to run interference? No, Henry said calmly, let her come. Everything is in place. He excused himself from the group he'd been speaking with and moved to a slightly more isolated position near one of the large windows overlooking the city. It didn't take long for Sophia to spot him and begin making her way through the crowd, her expression shifting into one of practiced contrition. Henry watched her approach, noting every detail of her performance, that deliberately hesitant steps, the vulnerability she was trying to project, the rehearsed remorse in her eyes. He'd seen this act before, when she wanted something particularly expensive or when she'd gone too far with her criticism and feared he might finally stand up for himself. It had never worked on him, even when he pretended it did. Henry, she said softly, stopping a few feet away. Thank you for letting me in. I wasn't sure you would. He regarded her silently, his face impassive. You look wonderful. She continued, filling the silence nervously. Congratulations on your award. I always knew you would be successful. The blatant line might have been amusing if it weren't so pathetic. Henry remained silent, simply watching her squirm under his gaze. Please, Sophia finally said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Can we talk? Just for a few minutes. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Henry repeated, his voice cool and controlled. Is that what you call throwing boiling water at me? A misunderstanding. Sophia glanced around nervously, aware that nearby guests were beginning to notice their interaction. I was upset. I didn't mean to hurt you. Yet you did. Henry's words were precise, measured. You meant to hurt me for years, Sophia. With your words, your disdain, your constant reminders of how disappointed you were in the husband you thought I was. I didn't know. She pleaded, taking a step closer. Several heads were now turning their way. I didn't know who you really were. If you had known I was wealthy, you would have treated me differently, Henry finished for her. That's not a defense, Sophia. It's a confession. Tears welled in her eyes, calculated. He knew Sophia had always been able to cry on command when it served her purposes. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But people deserve second chances, don't they? The opportunity to make things right. More people were watching now, the drama unfolding between them drawing attention from across the ballroom. Henry saw Veronica and David observing from a distance, their expressions a mixture of embarrassment and morbid curiosity. Forgiveness. Henry finally said, loud enough for those nearby to hear clearly, you mistake me for a weaker man. He made a subtle gesture to Kellen, who pressed a button on his phone. Instantly, the large screens positioned around the ballroom for the awards presentation flickered to life. The elegant Gala graphics disappeared, replaced by security camera footage. The footage showed their kitchen, date and timestamp clearly visible in the corner. Henry walking away, Sophia screaming. Then the moment that had changed everything, Sophia grabbing the pot of boiling water and deliberately throwing it at his retreating back, the splash visible as it hit him, his body jerking in pain. The audio was crystal clear. Beggar who can't work, get out of my house and never show your face again. A collective gasp went through the ballroom as hundreds of Charlotte's elite witnessed Sophia's assault. The footage froze on her face, contorted with rage, the empty pot still in her hands. Oh my God, Sophia! Veronica's whispered words carried in the sudden silence of the room. Sophia stood frozen, her face drained of color as she stared at the damning evidence displayed on every screen in the ballroom. The calculated tears had stopped, replaced by genuine shock and horror. It wasn't. She stammered, unable to form a coherent defense. It wasn't what Henry asked, his voice level. Wasn't you physically assaulting your husband? Wasn't you calling the CEO of a $500 million company a beggar? The footage seems quite clear, Sophia. She looked around wildly, seeing nothing but shocked and disgusted faces surrounding them. Her carefully crafted image, the wronged wife seeking reconciliation, had been shattered in seconds. I didn't come here to embarrass you, Henry continued, though they both knew that was exactly his intention. I came to accept an award for the business success you spent years belittling. Your presence is neither required nor welcome. He gestured subtly, and 2 security personnel materialized at Sophia's sides. These gentlemen will escort you out, Henry said, unless you'd prefer to make an even greater spectacle of yourself. Sophia's shock gave way to desperate anger. You can't do this to me. I'm your wife, ex-wife. As of this morning, Henry corrected her. The divorce was finalized at 9 a.m. You'll be receiving the papers tomorrow. You contested nothing, as you had no legal standing to do so. The security guards each took one of Sophia's arms, gently but firmly. You'll regret this, she hissed, her true nature emerging as her performance fell away. You think you've won, but I'll find a way to make you pay. Henry almost smiled at the empty threat. Goodbye, Sophia. I suggest using the service entrance. It's more appropriate for your current status. As the guards led her away, the murmurs in the ballroom grew louder. Henry nodded to Kellen, who signaled for the screens to return to the gala presentation. The moment of public spectacle was over, but the damage to Sophia's reputation was complete. Veronica approached cautiously, her husband trailing behind her. Henry, I had no idea she was planning to come tonight. I would have stopped her if it's fine. Veronica, Henry cut her off politely. Sophia made her choices. Now she's facing the consequences. The footage, Veronica said hesitantly. You've had it all this time. I've documented everything for years, Henry replied. Every insult, every public humiliation, every private cruelty. Tonight was just one example. David Stetson cleared his throat uncomfortably. She's been working for us, as I'm sure you know after tonight. Well, it might be best if alternative arrangements were made. Henry nodded. Do what you need to do. Sophia is no longer my concern. As they walked away, Kellen rejoined him. That went exactly as planned, he observed. Her reputation in the city is finished. Yes, Henry agreed, taking a sip of his champagne. And with it, her last hope of social redemption. The evening continued, the incident becoming the whispered topic of conversation throughout the gala. When Henry accepted his award later that night, the applause was particularly enthusiastic, partly for his business achievements, but also for the way he had handled the confrontation with such composure. In 01 mentioned the calculated cruelty of his public exposure of Sophia. No one needed to. In the world of power and wealth that Henry inhabited, such decisive handling of threats was not just accepted but admired. As he delivered his acceptance speech, Henry felt no triumph, no joy in Sophia's humiliation, only the cool satisfaction of a plan perfectly executed and the knowledge that justice's version of it was being served. The burn scar on his shoulder, hidden beneath his tuxedo, no longer hurt. But he would never forget it was there. The night air bit into Sophia's skin as she stumbled down the service entrance steps of the Westwood Hotel, her borrowed designer heels catching on the uneven pavement. The security guards have been professional but unmovable, escorting her through the kitchen where staff had paused their work to stare at the spectacle of a woman in evening were being removed from the premises. Her face burned with humiliation, tears of rage and shock streaming down her cheeks. She had been so certain her plan would work that Henry would be unwilling to cause a scene in front of his business associates, that she could appeal to whatever feelings he once had for her, that her practiced contrition would earn her a second chance. Instead, he had orchestrated her complete and utter humiliation. The security footage, the public exposure, the announcement of their divorce already finalized without her knowledge or participation, that a divorce she hadn't contested because she hadn't known it was happening. Sophia reached the street and realized she had no way home, no money for a rideshare, no phone with service, no friend to call. Veronica had driven her to the gala, reluctantly, after Sophia had begged and promised it would solve everything. Now her sister was inside, probably already distancing herself from the embarrassment Sophia had become. With no alternatives, she began walking, the borrowed stilettos pinching her feet with every step. The Westwood was in uptown Charlotte, a good 5 miles from Veronica's Myers Park mansion. A walk that would take hours in these shoes. "Damn you, Henry," she muttered, wiping angrily at her tears. "Damn you to hell." She had gone only a few blocks when a sleek black SUV pulled alongside her. The passenger window rolled down, revealing Veronica's perfectly composed face. "Get in," her sister said coolly. "You've made enough of a spectacle tonight." Sophia hesitated, pride warring with practicality. "Where's David?" "Still at the gala. I told him I needed to deal with this." Veronica's tone made it clear exactly what this meant. "Get in, Sophia." Now swallowing what little pride she had left, Sophia climbed into the passenger seat. Neither woman spoke as Veronica navigated the vehicle through Charlotte's evening traffic, the silence heavy with unspoken recriminations. Finally, as they turned onto the tree-lined street, leading to Veronica's neighborhood, Sophia broke. "He set me up. He wanted to humiliate me." "No," Veronica said sharply. "You humiliated yourself. Henry simply let everyone see who you really are. That video, it wasn't what it looked like." "I was provoked." Veronica barked a harsh laugh. "Provoked by what? His success? His patience? His willingness to let you believe he was struggling financially while you treated him like garbage?" She shook her head in disgust. "I saw the footage, Sophia. Everyone saw it. There is no defense for what you did." They pulled into Veronica's circular driveway, the mansion's exterior lights illuminating the pristine landscaping. Veronica parked but didn't immediately exit the vehicle. "Tonight was the final straw," she said, staring straight ahead. "David and I have decided it's best if you find somewhere else to stay." Sophia turned to her sister in shock. "What? You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." Veronica finally looked at her, eyes cold. "We have a reputation in the city, Sophia, businesses that depend on our good name. We can't be associated with this." She gestured vaguely at Sophia's tear-streaked face. "I'm your sister," Sophia protested, panic rising in her chest. "Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore." Veronica's voice was final. "You have until morning to collect your things from the guest house. I've left $500 on the bed, enough for a week at a budget motel while you figure out your next steps." "A motel?" Sophia repeated incredulously. "You want me to stay in some roach-infested dump while you live in this mansion?" "What I want," Veronica said with deadly calm, "is for you to face the consequences of your actions for once in your life. You threw boiling water at your husband, Sophia. You physically assaulted a man who gave you everything and asked for nothing but basic respect in return. And you've been nothing but a burden since you arrived at my home." She exited the vehicle, pausing to add, "The security system will be recoded in the morning. Don't try to come back after you leave." Sophia sat frozen in the passenger seat, unable to process the rapid disintegration of her life. In less than a month, she had gone from comfortable wife to her sister's maid to what, homeless, destitute. Eventually, she made her way to the guest house, each step heavy with dread. Inside, she found a promised $500 on the bed, along with a small suitcase not her own, but one Veronica had apparently provided for her to pack her meager belongings. The message was clear: pack will fit, the rest stays. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the money, more cash than she'd held in years, yet barely enough to sustain her for a week. The reality of her situation crashed over her in waves. No home, no husband, no job skills, no friends, even her sister had abandoned her. All because she had believed the illusion Henry had created, that he was unsuccessful, lacking ambition, worthy of her contempt, an illusion she had eagerly embraced because it allowed her to feel superior, to blame him for her dissatisfaction, to justify her increasingly cruel behavior. And now she had nothing, absolutely nothing. With mechanical movements, Sophia began packing the few items of clothing she had accumulated during her weeks of Veronica's. Most were plain, practical things she'd purchased for housekeeping duties, a far cry from the designer wardrobe she'd once possessed. As she folded a simple cotton blouse, a bitter laugh escaped her. She had spent years looking down on people who work service jobs, who live paycheck to paycheck, who struggle to make ends meet. Now she would be joining their ranks, but without their skills or experience or work ethic. She was in every sense getting exactly what she deserved. Morning came too quickly. Sophia had barely slept, her mind racing with futile plans and bitter regrets. She dragged the small suitcase to the main house, hoping for a final appeal to Veronica's sense of family obligation. But the mansion was silent, the doors locked. On the front step, she found an envelope containing a bus pass and a note in Veronica's elegant handwriting. "This is the last help you'll receive from me. Don't contact us again." Fighting back tears of frustration, Sophia made her way to the main road and caught the bus into the city center. She had no destination in mind, just a vague plan to find an affordable motel. And then what, look for work? What kind of job could she possibly get? Who would hire a middle-aged woman with no resume, no references, and no skills beyond shopping and criticizing? The bus wound through Charlotte's neighborhoods, from the pristine affluence of Myers Park to the mixed urban landscape of the city center. Sophia stared out the window, watching as the surroundings gradually changed, becoming less manicured, more functional, eventually transitioning to the slightly worn edges of working-class areas. She got off near a cluster of budget motels, the kind she would never even noticed in her previous life. Now she compared their advertised rates carefully, counting the days each would allow her to stretch Veronica's $500. The Victory Inn offered the lowest weekly rate, though its peeling paint and flickering neon sign explained why. Sophia approached the front desk, where a bored-looking clerk barely glanced up from his phone. "Need a room," she said, trying to keep the defeat from her voice. "The weekly rate?" The clerk pushed a form toward her ID and credit card for incidentals. "I'll be paying cash," Sophia said, fingering the bills in her purse. "And I don't. My ID was recently stolen. I'm waiting for replacement." The clerk finally looked at her properly, taking in her appearance, the expensive dress from last night, now rumpled from sleeping in it. The designer shoes scuffed from walking, the carefully maintained hair now limp and unwashed. "Cash only is an extra $50 deposit," he said after a moment. "No ID means you'll need to pay for the full week up front." Sophia nodded mutely, counting out the bills. Almost half of her money gone in an instant. The clerk handed her a key, an actual metal key, not the electronic card she was accustomed to, and pointed toward a corridor of numbered doors. "Room 114. Check out. Is it 11 a.m. on your last day? No refunds, no exceptions." The room was exactly what Sophia expected: small, dingy, with a bed that sagged in the middle and carpet that had seen better decades. The bathroom featured water stains around the fixtures and a shower curtain that reeked of mildew. But it was shelter, a temporary respite while she figured out what to do next. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the water-stained wall, and for the first time truly understood what Henry had done. He hadn't just left her, he had systematically dismantled every aspect of her life, every support system, every safety net, the house, the possessions, the family connection, her reputation, her social standing, all gone, piece by piece, in a carefully orchestrated sequence of events. 3 months after the Gala incident, Henry Ford stood on the private balcony of his newest acquisition, a sprawling estate in the same neighborhood where he had once lived with Sophia. The property had been completely renovated, transformed from a modest suburban home into a luxury day spa that catered to Charlotte's elite. The sign at the entrance, elegant in its simplicity, read, "Ford's Revenge, Spa and Wellness Retreat." Kellen joined him on the balcony, handing him a glass of aged whiskey. "Quite a turnout for the grand opening," he commented, nodding toward the valet area where luxury vehicles continually arrived, discharging well-heeled patrons eager to experience the city's newest exclusive establishment. "The waiting list is booked 3 months out," Henry confirmed, taking a sip of his drink. "The membership committee has been selective in their approvals." Kellen smiled knowingly. "I noticed Veronica and David Stetson were denied, as were all the Wexlers and anyone who expressed sympathy for Sophia's situation." Henry's tone was a matter of fact. "This isn't just a business venture. It's a statement that's turned quite profitable," Kellen noted. "The property value has tripled since the renovation." Henry nodded absently, his attention caught by a figure on the street below. A woman in worn clothing, pushing a shopping cart containing what appeared to be all her worldly possessions. Even from this distance, he recognized Sophia immediately. Her appearance had deteriorated significantly since he'd last seen her. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by thrift store cast-offs. Her once perfect hair hung limp and unwashed. She moved slowly with the hesitant gait of someone who had nowhere to go and all day to get there. She stopped at the edge of the property, staring up at the building that had once been their home, now transformed into a monument to her downfall. The irony of the name, Ford's Revenge, clearly not lost on her. Henry watched him passively as she stood there, a paper cup in her hand, occasionally approaching passers-by, who mostly ignored her or gave her a wide berth. The woman who had once sneered at the less fortunate was now one of them, homeless, penniless, reduced to begging on the street to the city where she had once aspired to social prominence. "She's there again," Kellen observed, following Henry's gaze. "Third time this week, I know, try to get your attention, most likely, or hoping you'll take pity on her." Henry took another sip of his whiskey, savoring the complex flavors. "She'll be disappointed on both counts. The managers want to know if they should call the police, have her removed for loitering." Kellen studied his friend's face. "Your call." Henry considered the question, watching as Sophia approached another potential donor who quickly walked away. No, he decided, let her stay, let her see what she lost, let her witness others enjoying the luxury. She might have shared if she'd been a different kind of person. Kellen nodded, unsurprised by the decision. "So what now?" "The European expansion is proceeding ahead of schedule. The Asian partnerships are exceeding projections. Nexus is more successful than ever." Now, Henry turned away from the sight of his former wife, focusing instead on the view of the city skyline in the distance. "I enjoy the peace that comes with knowing I never forgave, never forgot, and I won." Below, Sophia looked up, somehow sensing she was being observed. Their eyes met across the distance, hers filled with desperation and defeat, his cool and dispassionate. For a moment, they regarded each other, acknowledging the culmination of the path they had traveled. Then Henry simply turned away, dismissing her from his thoughts as easily as he had removed her from his life. He had more important matters to attend to. A business empire to run, a future to build, success to enjoy. Sophia, for the mistake he had methodically erased, was no longer worthy of his attention. "Another drink?" Kellen offered, reaching for the whiskey decanter. "Please," Henry replied, settling into one of the balcony's comfortable chairs, "and have Thomas bring up the quarterly reports when he arrives. We should review the projections before tomorrow's board meeting." As the sun set over Charlotte, casting its golden light across the city he had conquered, Henry Ford allowed himself a rare moment of complete satisfaction. Not because of Sophia's suffering that was merely a consequence, not a goal, but because he had proven himself to be exactly who he had always known he was, that a man who kept his word, a man who honored his commitments, a man who would never forgive. Betrayal, that a man who always inevitably won.